Set you free, but I really want to let you be. And a part of me wished I could set myself aside, just let you take the ride, just chalk the rest up to destiny. I could let you believe that the only restraints in life are the size of your dreams. Let you believe each kid grows up with the world at their feet. When I know too well it's open season, I know they're taking stock and raising stocks and raising stock. And I'm simply not here to sit and watch as you learn the lesson all cogs are taught. Keep your head down and keep to task and just keep on blocking the rest of it all out. Just keep on with the rest of the herd of a million adjacent oblivious workers. The forest unseen for the trees, and the trees unseen for the fallout. No, what's more damning, baby, the truth or the ignorance? Fuck it, I honestly wonder if I see the answer so well. Baby, believe me, well, I know it's scary, I scare myself. If I could find a way out of my head, I would run like hell. I would ditch this body politic, mindless occupant somewhere far from the dismal abyss. In the tranquil crystalline bliss of the beach, I could rest with the rest of the shells. And if anyone asks, I'm anywhere else. If I'm really needed, just light the candle, then read the book, and then ring the bell. Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul, this world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth and then demand 1,000-fold. It's full of greedy pigs who'll eat you out of house and home. They'll strip your bank account and sweep you somewhere down the road, and then return to eat your tent and shitty bike you rode. Your bottled water, only shoes and coat and broken phone. Then smiling in your face, they'll tell you that the shelter's closed.
An extreme way of thinking.
Hoped you would never find out, knew that you had to know. Pulling what's left of my mind out, trying to tell you so. I tried to block the light out, knew you could feel its glow. I've been here holding my hands out, trying to keep you close, trying to keep you
Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul, this world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth, then demand 1,000-fold. I tried to block the light just so I could keep you close. False alarm. I thought that help was here, but it was my own reassurance bouncing round 100,000 times in my own ecosphere. If every time you speak you keep it off the record, consequently you can keep your record clear. And if you mute the speech that shakes your frail beliefs, you only seek to insulate your image and continue down the stream in the direction clout and credit steers. Directly from your mouth into am I the asshole Reddit's ears. Directly back into the greasy pockets of some Gates Foundation financiers. And then directly back into the frantic final thoughts of early trial Neuralink volunteers, staring at the numb and mumbling vacancies where recently had been their peers. Half of whom are glitching with the memory stuck on pause, and half have zero fucking clue just who they are or why they're here. It's been said that fear is all we have to fear, but that was back before the Basosphere condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere. Where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere. Of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. How sweet, she said, bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge, and where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step, till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs, all laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer, Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You'll let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You'll let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You'll let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led.
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reid came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation.
What's up, everybody? Hopefully you heard who are these people.
Let us know if you did, because you just
Yeah, like I just played it and it was silent. That's weird. But anyway, we're here. There's another episode of Iron and News with me, Reef Breland, my co-host, Collin Radix-Carter, as he must be called, aka Care Bear. You know?
As I must be called, that's my name.
Yes, I know, right? You know? We do have an announcement before we get started with stories this week. Good news, everyone. Misty's coming to INN. So we're going to start doing Bitch with Comrade Misty. So that's going to be fun. Here's Indy and Jesse talking about it. If I get volume.
Who are these people?
Hold on. There we go.
Coming soon to INN, Bitch with Comrade Misty on Saturday nights. So get excited, get ready for that. I am like over the moon. Can't be more thrilled that that we're going to be partnering with Misty to help her bring that back and get her the forum to be able to vent the way she vents and have guests and friends and talk shit and stream, and it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. I cannot wait. So Grab's been working on a theme, on an intro. We've got some backgrounds and some things, and within the next couple of weeks, you're going to be seeing Misty, a Bitch with Comrade Misty on INN. So,
yep.
All right, everybody.
All right, everybody. So yeah, we're shooting for this Saturday, hopefully.
You know I can hear that, right?
You couldn't hear that.
No, I said that like a couple of times.
What is wrong with me? Well, people heard it. You already heard it. Misty's coming to INN.
Yes. But that won't bode well for my segments.
No, it's all right. I just fixed it. It's okay. Every time I gotta reload OBS, I have to flip-flop a switch. And sometimes I don't remember to. But like, now you can hear it, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. All right. So we also brought stories this week. Let's talk about those.
Yeah. But before we do that, we gotta say this every stream. Please like, share, sub. We are at 1,299 subs. If we can hit 1,300 by the end of this stream, that's not hard. That's only one sub at least.
Yeah,
we would appreciate it.
Nice.
Yes, as we've said this on chat before, and we're not necessarily begging you all for money, but the reality is, given some of the stories that we cover, which we enjoy doing because it's something different and something that we think that a lot of you guys would like to be educated on. Many of them are either demonetized or limited monetization, which usually means on YouTube
suppressed in general. So if you can help combat the suppression by sharing and liking and engaging as much as possible, we appreciate it.
And then if you care to support us financially, we would love it. But that being said, we also know it's hard for a lot of you all. So obviously, I will be the first to tell you, make sure you cover like
your own self,
your own selves, and the selves within the community that you live in first before you consider giving to us. That being said, any financial super chat or whatever you give to us, we will appreciate it. It helps, helps us obviously to make more content like this, but it also helps to counteract what effery YouTube does as far as the money that they choose not to give us. But capitalism. But sermon out of the way. Let's get into these stories. So I've been waiting to talk about this for weeks. When I heard that President Joe Biden would be giving the commencement address over the weekend. Funny enough, how he got the gig versus the vice president who went to Howard. So find that a little interesting. But we're going to talk about, well, I say it's a rant, but it's going to be painful, at least for me.
Yeah.
So it will be very painful for you guys. I'm very sorry. So we are going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Africa for a little bit. This probably would fit in a Mukwano episode. That's actually my personal channel, which I haven't done anything with.
You're welcome to take
I might
a clip.
just push. I probably will. But there are some advocacy groups there that are pushing their leaders to ditch fossil fuels in lieu of more sustainable energy resources.
Okay.
So we are going to talk about that, and I think it's very interesting given this is part of the East African Federation. So it's a group of countries, you know, you can kind of think of it as like their version of the European Union, which consists of Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, Congo, Rwanda, Burundi. So we are going to talk about that. And then what you got, Reef?
I've got the Durham report. We're going to talk about that and the, you know, into Russiagate and see if it's a nothing burger or not, as, you know, the media would like you to believe. And I brought a story that I haven't seen anyone talk about, and it's from 2016. Like, I didn't remember anyone talking about. They made an Abu Ghraib musical, Collin. So we're gonna get into that. So, but anyway, you ready?
I'm ready. So President Joe Biden over the weekend gave the commencement address at Howard University. So this is kind of a local story for me since I live in DC. Which again, as I said, is a little interesting considering that Vice President Kamala Harris is an alumni. You figured she would have done the gig, but
Paul Mooney
instead,
down here. Nice.
right? We'll bring up Paul Mooney toward the end. But yeah, funny how the vice president didn't get this speaking gig over the one who never went to Howard and is also in cognitive decline. But I digress. So anyway, he gave his speech was about just shy of 30 minutes. And it was very depressing. I'll say it right now. Chadwick Boseman did it better.
Okay.
But unfortunately, there are a couple of things that I will pull from his commencement address. Obviously, the big thing that was spoken about over the weekend was Biden talking about white supremacy in this country. So we will highlight that a little bit just so you guys can see what he actually said. And then there are a couple other clips that I pulled that I think are also interesting in regards to, you know, our current state of affairs in this country and how it pertains to these graduates who are about to go out into the world and realize the fuckery that this president in part has brought them into. So let's get into it. So this clip is probably, as I said, the one that got the most attention, where he starts talking. Well, he kind of relates to, you know, his term as vice president and coming off of Trump.
What clip? This clip?
Yeah, but actually before that, I totally forgot that I sent a tweet. I said on Saturday, I remember a certain president who proposed canceling student loan debt for students who attended HBCUs. Today, this president is speaking at Howard University's commencement as student loan payments are about to restart. I hope the students protest. So that's what I said on Saturday. And it didn't look like there was any. There were a handful.
Like one. You know?
I think according to reports, there was like a dozen students there who did like a quiet protest,
Yeah.
but obviously not enough to make any news or gain any attention. But we
Right.
will talk about one king in particular who did something. But anyway, let's get into this address. Well, the first part I want to show,
Okay.
where Brian talks about white supremacy.
Cool.
While waiting for Barack, I was both living history at the same time I was reliving it. A vivid demonstration when it comes to race in America. Hope doesn't travel alone. It's shadowed by fear, by violence, and by hate.
Oh, sorry.
What? You're okay.
That was me. Sorry.
While waiting for Barack, I was both living history at the same time I was reliving it. A vivid demonstration when it comes to race in America. Hope doesn't travel alone. It's shadowed by fear, by violence, and by hate. But after the election and the re-election of the first black American president, I had hope.
President, my
Fear,
boss.
violence, and hate was significantly losing ground. After no longer being vice president, I became a professor at the University of Pennsylvania for 4 years. But in 2017, in Charlottesville, Virginia, crazed neo-Nazis with angry
The dude
faces
next to him looks like he's asleep.
came out of the fields literally with
Probably
torches, carrying Nazi banners from the woods and the fields, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s, something I never thought I would ever see in America. Accompanied by Klansmen and white supremacists,
What about
emerging
Ukraine?
from dark rooms and remote fields and the anonymity of the internet,
Like in
confronting
like, yes,
decent Americans of all backgrounds,
in Europe.
standing in their way into the bright light of day. And a
was
young
at
woman,
night.
objecting to their presence, was killed. And what did you hear? That famous
And you
quote,
ain't black.
when asked about what happened. That famous quote, "There are very fine people on both sides." That's when I knew, and I'm not joking, that's when I knew I had to stay engaged and get back into public life. No,
Pause right here.
I don't.
So notice how he was like, oh, because of white supremacy,
Mm-hmm.
it forced me to come back into public office. Not, oh, like,
Not the crime bill
healthcare.
or the right, like
right. None of the stuff that he has actually had a hand in making this country worse, especially for some of these, I would say for all intents and purposes, all these families in this room and these students who are about to graduate into the world. He didn't come back for that.
mm-mm.
But no, he decided to come back because of, I won't say the word because I don't want to potentially get us in trouble, but you know, but the ends,
Mhm.
you know, in terms of, you know, what happened several years ago under Trump. So yeah, funny how he came back for that and nothing for anything economic, but we'll continue.
I don't say for that reason. I say for the journey. I don't have to tell you that fearless progress toward justice often meets ferocious pushback from the oldest and most sinister of forces. That's because hate never goes away. I thought when I graduated.
That, I mean, he's just telling on himself there.
Right.
Hate never goes away. Okay.
We could defeat hate, but it never goes away. It only hides under the rocks.
Mm.
And when it's given oxygen, it comes out from under that rock. And that's why we know this truth as well. Silence is complicity. It cannot remain silent. We have to live through this battle for the soul of the nation. And it is still a battle for the soul of the nation. What is the soul of a nation? Well, I believe the soul is the breath, the life, the essence of who we are. The soul makes us us. The soul of America is what makes us unique among all nations. We're the only country founded on an idea, not geography, not
except highly influenced by geography and less ideas, but yes, continue.
Religion, not ethnicity, but an idea. The sacred proposition rooted in Scripture and enshrined in the Declaration of Independence that we're all...
He just said that it wasn't founded on religion and then goes to... and it's documented in Scripture.
Right. What? Created equal.
Except when it was founded, we weren't all created equal.
Well,
so,
if you were a white Anglo-Saxon male
who owned land,
then yeah. You're good.
You're good.
Everyone else
yep.
can kick rocks.
Yep.
Especially if black people, you weren't even considered human. But
yeah.
Continue.
In the image of God and deserve to be treated equally throughout our lives. While we've never fully lived up to that promise, we never before fully walked away from it.
Yes, you have.
We know that American history has not always been a fairy tale.
And you ain't black.
From the start, it's been a constant push and pull for more than 240 years. Between the best of us, the American ideal that we're all created equal, and the worst of us.
Oh shit, he remembers he read a book.
That racism has long torn us apart. It's a battle that's never really over. But on the best days, enough of us have the guts and the hearts to stand up for the best in us. To choose love over hate, unity over disunion, progress over retreat. To stand up against the poison, white supremacy, as I did my inaugural address, to single out as the most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy.
The most dangerous thing in this country, I'm just paraphrasing, is white supremacy.
Yeah, that's what he said.
There's a tweet that I pulled that kind of counters that, but this is kind of what everyone was talking about over the weekend regarding this commencement address. It's like, oh yes, go Biden, like he actually called out white supremacy, like, but you notice that this is what he's going with. This is similar to his State of the Union address. This is similar to many speeches that he's given before. I remember like when he won the election, how he mentioned that he was going to be the president that would unite everybody, right? Like he was going to be the president. Like he called out the idea, like we are so fractured in terms of thought and just whatever, that he was going to unify people. And here he is several years later at a HBCU talking about how the others are the ones that are affecting your life, whereas he's been the one, in part, that's helped perpetuate that state of white supremacy. And I talked about this last year because you might remember this, Reef, when I went to my awards function with Empower, the advocacy group that I'm a part of, that Jamal Bowman, who spoke, kind of said something very similar to this.
Yeah.
Unity. And I had to point out back then that a lot of the white supremacy that is caused in this country is not due to, the Republicans, as many of our politicians now, especially on the Democrat side, would like to say. Like, a lot of this appearance to white supremacy is actually among the elite, and especially ones who are educated. I made that point last year in terms of the eugenics movement in the country that was pushed by, the elites, the progressives at the time, especially at the Ivy League schools. So the idea that he's trying to kind of phrase like he's kind of talking about both sides of his mouth, and the idea of like we need to get together, we need to be unified, but at the same time, it's like we need to tackle the people who allegedly are causing or perpetuating white supremacy in this country. Nothing in regards to economics, nothing in regards to, you know, how to elevate the African American condition in terms of doing things practically that will help uplift all Black people and not just these guys who are probably going to go on and promote Black capitalism, you know, in their lives. Not all, but I would say many of them will. And nothing in regards to, you know, yeah, it's just very ominous and very dark. Like, I thought, like, commencement speeches are meant to be hopeful, you know, and whatnot. And Biden can actually provide that in terms of offering like legislation or again, kind of things that he has done that going out to the world will make their lives a little bit easier. But he doesn't mention that at all in terms of anything that he said. Is just a lot of fear mongering and yeah, just it's very sad that, you know, that the students there did not call him out on that right there.
Yeah.
You know, but anyway, so that's, as I said, that was what most people were talking about that at least I saw on Twitter. There are a couple other clips I do want to highlight that weren't necessarily mentioned. So we can go to this next part, which kind of follows what he just stated just now. This is more kind of the crux of his speech in terms of really what you'll just listen to it. Go ahead.
I'm saying this because I'm at a Black HBCU. I say it wherever I go. To stand up for truth over lies, lies told for power and profit. To confront the ongoing assault to subvert our elections, suppress our right to vote. That assault came just as you cast your first ballots in 20 and 22. Record turnouts. You delivered historic progress. I made it clear that Americans of all backgrounds, have an obligation to call out political violence that has been unleashed and emboldened. As was mentioned already, bomb threats to this very university and HBCUs across the country. To put democracy on the ballot, to reject political extremism and reject political violence, protect fundamental rights and freedom for women to choose, for transgender children to be free, for affordable health care and housing, for the right to raise your family and retire with dignity. Stand with leaders of your generation who give voice to the people
get to that.
demanding action on gun violence, only to be expelled from state legislative bodies. To stand against books being banned and Black history being erased. I'm serious. Think about it.
I'm
to
not
stand
gonna,
up for the best in us.
I hate that.
And today I come here to Howard to continue the work to redeem the soul of this nation, because it's here where I see the future, and that's not hyperbole. We can finally resolve those ongoing questions about who we are as a nation that put strength of our diversity at the center of American life. The future that celebrates and learns from history. A future for all Americans. A future I see you leading, and I'm not, again, exaggerating. You are going to be leading it. Again, let's be clear. There are those who don't see you and don't want this future. There are those who demonize and pit people against one another. And there are those who do anything and everything, no matter how desperate or immoral, to hold on to power.
And I know those people very well when I look in the mirror.
Right.
You know?
Right. And you notice how he talked about every cultural issue available. And he just kind of glossed over like, oh, you helped us fight for affordable housing. No, you didn't. Affordable healthcare. Well, for for like seniors in terms of insulin. And yeah, this is yeah, I just hated this. I really just hated this whole thing because again, like, and not to sound like stereotypical, but you know, again, like commencement speeches are meant to be hopeful in terms of, you know, you're going out of the world and yeah, there might be shit going on, but like you have the education, you have something that you're looking forward to, you have something that you're able to kind of go in the world and try and make a change. You know, just kind of like the usual pomp and circumstance in terms of these graduation things, you know, and like Biden is just kind of going off this doom and gloom in terms of, yeah, this white supremacy. And yeah, you helped vote us in and we're trying to do all these issues for you. But you didn't mention like the last 2 years when he actually had a majority in both houses that he basically got nothing done. And especially he didn't get anything done in terms of trying to improve the lives in the room that he claims that he is trying to work on their behalf. Any other thought before I go to this last clip?
No.
Because I think this is probably the worst one, honestly.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Give me a little break here.
So let's go to the last one. So this is kind of like, to me, this is probably the most telling. So focus on the crowd, like for what you hear. So this is what I want you guys to focus on in watching this part of the speech. So go ahead.
Every class enters the history of a nation up to the point it has been written by others. But few classes, once in every several generations, enters at a point in our history where it actually has a chance to change the trajectory of the country. You face that inflection point today, and I know you'll meet the moment. I just think about the many ways you already have. With your voices and votes, I was able to fulfill my commitment to put the first black woman on the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And by the way,
how did that help?
She's brighter than the rest. She is one bright woman. Because of you, more black women have been appointed to the federal appellate courts than under every other president in American history combined.
Okay, how's that gonna help?
And by the way, I mean it. I mean it because of you. Because of you. You turned out. You spoke up. You knew. You showed up and the votes counted. And you made people say, whoa, wait a minute. What price will I pay if I don't do the following? You feel the promise and peril of climate change. Because of you, we're making the biggest investment ever in the history of the world in climate change.
While opening up the Arctic to drilling.
Right.
I'm keeping my promise that no one should be in jail merely because of using and possessing marijuana. Their record should be expunged.
Except that didn't happen. You didn't release anyone from anything. Like, we talked about that too, did we not?
Yes.
About how that was completely bullshit.
Right. And then there were other mayors who tried to
do similar stuff that essentially no one was being anyway.
My student debt relief plan would help tens of millions of people. Especially those on Pell Grants.
So pause here. 70%. So like, you notice how they were cheering over that?
Yes, they don't know what it is.
They don't know what it is. Y'all need to listen to me because I've been screaming from the rafters for the last few months. He's not going to cancel your damn debt.
No. No.
Watch it next month when the Supreme Court strikes it down, and then watch them say, "Oh, like it's the Supreme Court's fault, or it's a federal judge's fault."
Yep.
Watch.
Yep.
Black college students receive Pell Grants. Many of you, the savings would be significant in even wiping out student debt completely for some. But
for some.
And I'm sure not for them.
Definitely not at Howard.
20,000 is not going to go anywhere at Howard. I forgot what the average tuition is, but it's more than 20,000 a year. Given the infrastructure, because I live nearby, to me, it's not worth 20,000. But regardless, like 20,000 ain't gonna do shit.
Nope.
For any of them in that room.
this new Republican Party is dead set against it, suing my administration to stop me from getting student debt relief. The same opposition who received relief loans, I might add, to keep their businesses afloat during the pandemic. Members of the Congress
and who let them do that?
Millions of dollars, most of which didn't have to be paid back. Yet they say it's okay for them, but not for you. I find it outrageous. To reduce your student debt service payments when you graduate, we're also ensuring that no one with an undergraduate loan today or in the future will have to pay more than 5% of discretionary income to repay their loans, down from 10, and in 20 years is gone.
Right, so we'll make sure they don't take as much as your money out of your, like, only 5% of your income is going to be taken. Okay.
With jobs that, depending on what they do,
with massively high interest rates on top of that, which then would just make you pay more.
Right.
Like.
Right. That's the part that they're not saying.
Republican officials are fighting that as well. But I'll always keep fighting for you, and many others will, and many in the Republican Party as well will.
You couldn't fight your way out of a paper bag there, hombre.
We also know there's more to do. Because of your power, we took the most significant law on gun violence. We passed it, most significant law in 30 years. But we will not give up. I got the assault weapons ban passed 30 years ago, and we're going to pass it again. We must pass it. There's more to do on police reform.
You got it passed, but then what happened?
During the State of the Union, I asked the rest of the country to imagine having to talk to their children, their families, like your families had to talk to you. It's about your security. It's about your dignity. It's demeaning and degrading and deadly when you have to stand there and say, when you're stopped, turn the interior light on. Put both hands on the wheel. Don't reach for your license. What in the hell's going on in there?
You wrote the crime bill. That was you. Like stop and frisk and whatnot. That was you. Like.
Think about it. I ask all the parents, not minority children, ask what they would say, what they would do. I know you're frustrated that there's so many elected officials who refuse to pass a law that will do something. Kamala and I stood next to the family of George Floyd and the civil rights leaders and law enforcement officials to sign the executive order I came up with requiring the key elements of the George Floyd bill be applied to federal law enforcement. Banning chokeholds, restricting no-knock warrants, establishing a database for police misconduct, advancing effective and accountable community policing that builds public trust. And we'll keep fighting to pass the reforms nationwide. Equal justice is a covenant we have with each other.
Ain't no talks of defunding anything, though, did he?
No. So, yeah, to summarize, this speech was bullshit. He tried to find every cultural thing or any issue that he believed that whoever wrote this did a shitty job, honestly. But tried to pick every cultural issue that he believed that they would connect with in order to get the applause, trying to, get them, so hyped up in terms, especially with student debt, knowing that it's not going to get passed, but essentially being like, just kind of putting the fear and trepidation in their hearts in terms of, if you kind of saying without saying, if you don't vote for us, the Republicans are going to do more shit. So you have to vote for us. Yeah. To kind of counter that in the hope that we'll actually do something. Right. So anyway, as I said, there was several, as I said, unfortunately, and I was waiting to see if there was going to be a massive protest at Howard. There wasn't. But there were a few people that, did their thing, that actually were brave enough to actually stand against Biden. So this tweet is from Benny Johnson. There were several people that tweeted this out, but he was one of them that I pulled. Savage HBCU student had savage message for Joe Biden as he delivered commencement address at Howard University graduation ceremony. Biden and Harris don't care about Black people, so he had that written on top of his graduation cap. Word up to you, King. So
good for you, bro.
Next slide. This is from Ron Milner, and he writes, remember when Joe Biden said he would unite America? White supremacy is the single most dangerous terrorist threat in our homeland. Joe Biden at Howard University filling the minds of young people with hate and fear. As I said, he claimed that he was going to try and unite us after Trump, and here he is trying to call out the others in terms of white supremacy. So we got
and he looks like the white supremacist mascot in this photo.
Oh yeah, all he needs is a hood, and some of you said
literally it's close enough, right? Like he looks like a grand wizard right now.
So if you go to our next slide.
Oh, I know this guy.
We talked about this young cat, and I wish we didn't have to, but he's making the rounds on TikTok or whatever, making his money, so he can buy his arrow or whatnot. But here he goes saying, President Biden was right to say that white supremacy is the biggest domestic threat. The far right and their conspiracies are the most dangerous than anything affecting America right now. Thank you for telling the truth, Mr. President. And so the next slide, we have Frank Lombardi, who calls him out in response. And I thought this was the perfect tweet, where he says, propaganda is currently the biggest threat at home. And whether or not you're smart enough to realize it yet, your account is a prime example of exactly the kind of BS propaganda that the ruling class has been shoving down the throats of the working class for 50 plus years. But you wouldn't know anything about the working class, would you? Nah, didn't think so. In all seriousness, I hope you sleep soundly at night after all that Adderall wears off, knowing that you sold your soul to a system and to a party that couldn't give two shits about your generation, two shits about the people, nor two shits about the so-called threat of white supremacy, beyond how many votes it can scare up among the hopelessly stupid, the perpetually uninformed, and the easily frightened.
Bravo, sir.
Facts. So I had enough, but so don't play it yet. Actually, no. Go ahead. So I pulled this one because Reef, I know you love this guy.
God,
is based or whatever.
Yeah.
And someone reminded me of, funny enough, someone reminded me of this quote a few days before the commencement address, which I thought was very appropriate to play here. So this goes out to all the Howard administration and some of y'all students who were actually happy that Biden allowed Biden to spoke at your Howard halls.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Mr. Mooney. Say your piece.
Because white folks love you when you're scared. There's only two kind of black people in America today. You either running free or you running scared. How you running? And I'm not dumb. Race has nothing to do with color. I ain't stupid. Because there's a bunch of you black Anglo-Saxons. That skin is black, but that brain is white. And when I get mad at you, guess what I call you? You graham cracker motherfucker.
I mean,
yeah,
couldn't have said that myself. You know, so shame on the Howard administration, who basically were capping for Biden. Shame, and I can't even blame the students that hard. Actually, yes, I can. Shame on the Howard students that really should know better, that to not make a stand.
Shame.
Yeah, who didn't make a stand at your graduation and make noise in regards to the very president who is going to lead you into a life of hell. And you do not realize, either you don't realize it, or you're too scared to say something in regards to it, or you're too ignorant, which speaks to the education that unfortunately you didn't receive, because we don't teach you how to think critically for yourselves. We're teaching you to basically to be puppets to the system and to placate to people like Joe Biden. So, I mean, that's all I got. So that's my rant. So anything else you want to say before we move on?
Nope. I think you did it.
Yeah. So like I said, you know, I feel bad for the students, but at the same time, I don't feel so bad I feel bad in how those people in that room were part of the radical revolution in the 60s. Pretty much all of them, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And they just sat there watching Joe Biden spout that shit in fear to placate to them and the Democrats in the mindset of, oh, we will do something for you. It's just the Republicans or whatever.
Right.
And so,
yeah.
I'm good.
Speaking of, let's do that and then redo that. There we go. So this has been happening. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but there's a guy called John Durham who's been making an investigation happen about a bunch of stuff, actually, but specifically, this might be the end of Russiagate. And as you'll see later, you know, plenty of mainstream media acting like this is nothing.
The end of Russiagate? No.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna milk that for all it's worth for at least
They're
another
still
few
gonna try, but we'll get into it. So this is an amazing article by Aaron Mate. Oh, Aaron Mate over at the Gray Zone. Aaron Mate yelled at me. So, with Clinton lawyer charged, the Russiagate scam is now under indictment. Realize we can indict a ham sandwich, so keep that in mind, right? But this has some credible stuff here that the Republicans are more than willing to use coming up in this next election. So, in accusing Clinton campaign lawyer Michael Sussman of lying to the FBI, special counsel John Durham offers new evidence of the fabrications behind the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory. The indictment of Hillary Clinton attorney Michael Sussman offers new evidence that the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory that engulfed Trump's term in office was itself the production of fabrications involving Clinton's 2016 campaign. Although Sussman faces just one count on a false statement charge, the 27-page charging document offers an expansive window on how the Russiagate scam began and how Democratic operatives, intelligence officials, and establishment media figures dishonestly fed it to the public. So, Sussman, until recently an attorney with Clinton campaign law firm Perkins Coie, is the second person to be charged by John Durham, the special counsel scrutinizing the Russia investigation. Sussman was accused of lying to the FBI during a September 2016 meeting in which he tried to raise alarm about, quote, secret communications between the Trump organization and Russia's Alfa Bank. Sussman gave then FBI attorney Jim Baker documents and data purporting to show that computer servers associated with Trump and Alfa Bank were in regular contact. This was evidence, Sussman argued, of a possible covert back channel. According to Durham, Sussman told Baker that he was not working for any client and was simply passing on information that he had been provided to him by multiple cyber experts who had come across the suspicious web traffic. But according to the detailed indictment, Sussman was in fact cooking up a politically motivated scam. The theory of a purported covert Trump Alpha channel has been concocted by an unnamed tech executive positioning himself for a top cybersecurity job in the anticipated Clinton administration. To spread the theory to the media and intelligence community, the executive and Sussman coordinated. Durham says with Mark Elias, a college of Sussman at Perkin Coie, and the top lawyer for Clinton's 2016 campaign. The theory of a purported covert Trump Alpha channel has been concocted by an unnamed tech executive, right? We read that, right? Sussman and Elias, in turn, coordinated with the private intelligence company Fusion GPS. Elias had already hired the firm on Clinton's behalf to produce the Steele dossier, the collection of fabricated reports by ex-British spy Christopher Steele, alleging a long-standing Trump-Russia conspiracy blackmail relationship. According to Steele, it was Sussman, in a July 2016 meeting, who first informed him about the Alfa Bank server story. Elias kept Clinton campaign members informed as well, including the, quote, campaign manager, communications director, and foreign policy advisor. In February 2017, Sussman also met with a CIA official to push the Alfa Bank narrative. Sussman concealed the plot from the FBI, along with the fact that he was billing Clinton for his involvement. The meeting with the FBI's Baker, for example, was charged to the Clinton campaign as work and communications regarding confidential project. So he got paid for that, right? In fact, according to Durham, all or nearly all of Sussman's work on the Alfa Bank story prior to meeting Baker was billed to the Clinton campaign. So that right there is, so in Sussman's orbit, hiding the money trail was established Russiagate practice. His law firm Perkins Coie and the Clinton campaign concealed that they had funded the Steele dossier until a subpoena from the GOP-controlled House Intelligence Committee forced them to admit the truth in October 2017. The FBI also concealed Steele's Democratic funders from the FISA court when it used the dossier to obtain a surveillance warrant on Trump campaign volunteer Carter Page. So Sussman is charged for failing to disclose that he was acting on behalf of Clinton's team, but the indictment makes clear that Durham has uncovered a wider deception. For weeks prior to his meeting with the FBI, Sussman worked with the unnamed technology executive, Tech Executive One, okay, who, like the Clinton campaign, was also Sussman's client. The executive's goal, Durham says, was to create a, quote, narrative about Trump's, quote, ties to Russia, which would ultimately please certain VIPs, i.e. Sussman's client in the Clinton campaign. There it is. This is the actual thing that Durham is putting together, right? So, Tech Executive One's goal.
Just for reference for people in the chat, when did Aaron write this article?
Like, few
Actually, I can
weeks,
check.
like, yeah, you can check for me. Because this is ongoing. Like May 10th, maybe?
No, so he wrote this in September 2021. So
Okay.
almost 2 years.
Right. So I've got some more coming. So, who worked as a U.S.-based university to search broadly through internet data for any information about Trump's potential ties to Russia. In connection with this tasking, as an alleged in further detail below, Tech Executive One's goal was to support an interference and narrative regarding Trump that would please certain VIPs. Moreover, and as alleged below, Tech Executive One provided information that he gathered through these interactions to his lawyer Sussman, so that Sussman could assist in drafting and disseminating materials to the media and the FBI. So, to advance this goal, the executive took advantage of his ownership position at several companies to access public and non-public internet data and tasked several people to assist him. Their efforts yielded a cache of purported DNS traffic between a Trump-adjacent marketing server and Alpha Bank in Russia. According to Durham, the tech executive researchers expressed misgivings about the project. One team member relayed continued doubt about the Trump Alpha conspiracy theory that Sussman would later convey to the FBI, and concerns that the project was driven not by data but by bias against Trump. To suggest even a, quote, very weak association, the researcher warned, we will have to expose every trick we have in our bag. At one point, the executive himself even admitted that the Trump Alpha Bank traffic was not a secret channel, but in fact, a red herring. But that ultimately did not stop him from working with Sussman to draft white papers and collect data that would be submitted to the FBI in the service of the VIP care narrative. The FBI would ultimately reach the same red herring conclusion that the executive had concealed. As Durham notes, the email server at issue was not owned or operated by the Trump org, but rather has been administered by a mass marketing email company that sent advertisements for Trump hotels and hundreds of other clients. For its part, Alpha Bank has filed suit against the computer researchers involved, accusing them of doctoring computer data in a deliberate smear campaign to tie the bank to Trump. A link to the report commissioned by Alpha Bank points that threat actors may have artificially created DNS activity between Trump and Alpha Bank to make it appear as though a connection existed for discovery later. So the FBI's investigation of the Alpha Bank theory proved to be just as fruitless as every other of the fabricated Trump-Russia conspiracies theories chased by U.S. intelligence officials, congressional committees, and media outlets for more than 3 years. But Sussman's effort ultimately serves its purpose. The FBI meeting gave journalists a news hook to publish the Alpha Bank allegations just days before the 2016 election. Weeks later, the DNC-funded Steele dossier would see a similar entry into public consciousness. After sitting on the salacious dossier for months, the U.S. media was given a news hook to publish it when the FBI director Jim Comey, in concert with other intelligence officials, went to Trump Tower and briefed then-President-elect Trump about the alleged P-tape. Right? So, on October 31st, Slate's Franklin Foer, as well as Eric Lichblau and Stephen Lee Myers of the New York Times, published stories about the Trump Alpha Bank secret channel. Right? This is after they've already figured out all of this is Bubkiss. Right? So the Times story revealed the Trump campaign associates, as well as the Alpha Bank theory, was the subject of an FBI investigation. The Clinton campaign immediately promoted the story as part of its public campaign to portray Trump as a Kremlin stooge. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to a Russian-based bank. Hillary Clinton announced on Twitter, "It's time for Trump to answer serious questions about his ties to Russia." Right, and there she is, asking that very thing, right? Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server, and that's what, October 31st of 2016?
Yeah.
Right? So, they're October 31st again, right? You know, this is after they all know this isn't the case. Right? So Clinton also shared a statement from her then foreign policy advisor, Jake Sullivan. The secret hotline, Sullivan claimed, could be the most direct link yet between Donald Trump and Moscow, and may be the key to unlocking the mysteries of Trump's ties to Russia. To Sullivan, it certainly seems the Trump org felt it had something to hide. But 5 years later, now we have the confirmation that it was in fact the Clinton campaign that was hiding its roles as the source of this story. As Glenn Greenwald notes, both Hillary and Jake Sullivan were pretending that they had learned about this shocking story from Slate, when in fact it was Hillary's own lawyers and researchers who had spent weeks pushing the story to both the FBI and friendly journalists like Foer. In other words, it was Hillary and her team who had manufactured the hoax, then pretended that, like everyone else, they were just learning about it and believing it to be true, because a media outlet to which they had fed the false stories had just published it. So, indeed, the Clintons' campaign role in planting the Alpha Bank story was so extensive that it appears to have influenced the day it came to light. As Durham recounts, on October 30th, a Fusion GPS employee wrote to Slate Foer and told him time to hurry. Foer responded by sharing what he called the first 2,500 words of his article, and then published it the following day. He never disclosed that the story had come to him from Trump's Democratic rival. Right? So, comparing the indictment details to the way Foer and other credulous journalists spun the Clinton-fueled Alpha Bank narrative offers a window on how the media enabled the scam, whereas Durham reveals that the Alpha Bank team was instructed to create a narrative about Trump-Russia ties that would please Democratic Party's VIPs. The Alpha researchers gave the Clinton campaign's media dupes an inverse cover story. They were simply well-meaning internet sleuths trying to protect Trump's campaign too. We wanted to help defend both campaigns because we wanted to preserve the integrity of the election. One of the unknown researchers told Ford, "We thought there was no way in the world the Russians would just attack the Democrats, but the Republicans too." Another source told the New Yorker's Dexter Filkins, "We were trying to protect them," they said. Except they were the ones that put the information out to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here it is in the New Yorker, right? Filkins' story published in October of 2018, 2 years after Foer, and long after the FBI had privately concluded that there was nothing to it, gave the Alpha Bank story a new shelf life. Natasha Bertrand, now a correspondent for CNN, joined Foer on MSNBC in October 28 to declare that the Alpha Bank Trump connection was in fact a smoking gun. "What more evidence do you need? It's very, very obvious," Bertrand said. Right, here's Glenn Greenwald saying that. Right, one of the journalists who most aggressively promoted the fake Trump Alpha Bank server story was Natasha Bertrand, at the center of so many Russiagate frauds, including the Steele dossier, and got promoted over and over for it. Now at CNN. That was September 16th. Right? Here's Glenn Greenwald in reply. Right? With the Business Insider here. Right? Aaron Monte, I mean, what more evidence do you need? It's very, very obvious. And here she is. Right here.
I mean, what more evidence do you need? It's very, very obvious, and it's really Occam's razor here. The fact that we still have not been able to rule out the idea that this was a covert communication channel 2 years after the fact that no one has come forth with a plausible explanation for why this was happening, for why Alpha Bank was one of 3 organizations communicating with the Trump server in those months leading up to the election is just...
Except they already knew why it was going to... They already knew.
Right.
Completely remarkable. And I think the fact that Frank's story got overlooked or criticized as much as it did, and the fact that now it's being revisited and you have the editor of the New York Times saying that there, was a story there, just shows the lack of imagination.
So there's that. Right? That same night, Filkins was given a effusive reception from cable news, leading Trump-Russia conspiracy theorist. "We are blessed as a country to have journalists as talented as you and Franklin Foer writing about this," Rachel Maddow told Filkins from across the anchor desk. Right? In 2018, to Dexter Filkins on his and Foer's stories about secret Trump-Russian bank contacts, DNC-funded scandalous are subject to federal indictment. So here's Maddow. Right?
We are blessed as a country to have journalists as talented as you and Franklin Foer writing about this, because it's a difficult thing, and the storytelling ability around a story like this is very important because it's hard to get at the core of it unless you're great with words.
So, great company, right? Predictably, the same media voices who parented the Alpha Bank story and countless other Russian fantasies throughout the Trump era. Yep.
Switch.
One day before, countless other Russian fantasies throughout the Trump era have now fallen silent or continued obfuscating. One day before Sussman's indictment, Maddow covered the story based on a link to the New York Times from someone in Sussman's camp. This allowed Maddow to avoid the damning details revealed in the indictment the following day, and instead portray the as-yet uncharged case as a trivial ploy from a special prosecutor desperate to show results. "The only hoax is the charge contained in this indictment," Maddow's guest, MSNBC legal analyst Barbara McQuaid, declared. Neither Foer and Filkins have publicly commented on the indictment. If his past record is any indication, Filkins is not one for contrition. In October 2020, 2 years after his initial story and more than 1 year after the Mueller report, found zero evidence to support the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory, including the Alpha Bank story. Filkins attempted a half-hearted defense. Filkins has discovered that Durham was eyeing the Alpha Bank researchers for possible criminal charges, and then Alpha Bank had itself filed associated lawsuits. He framed the legal activity as, quote, troubling and warned that it could aid the Kremlin. Filkins even threw in a plug for Steele, whose information, he declared, has neither been proved nor disproved. Filkins may have missed the main sections of a scathing Department of Justice report on December 2019, which blasted the FBI for relying on Steele's fabrications. With the Steele dossier now widely discredited and Sussman's indictment adding new details of related deception, the Clinton campaign is now connected to yet one more documented scam in a sprawling effort to plant Trump-Russia conspiracy theories in the media and trigger federal investigative activity. As we will turn to in the second part of this report, Sussman's role in the Alpha Bank fabrication raises new questions about the allegation at the heart of the Trump-Russia scandal. The claim that Russia stole emails from the Democratic Party and gave them to WikiLeaks in a covert operation to help Trump's campaign. This allegation was generated by a different private firm, CrowdStrike, which, like Fusion GPS, was also hired by Perkins Coie, specifically by Michael Sussman. Right, here it is. They ask him, if I can just clarify one thing you said, CrowdStrike was working for Perkins Coie. Is that the contract was actually with the law firm then? Mr. Wilson, correct. We had a contract between Perkins Coie and CrowdStrike with a scope of work for the DNC specific work. Mr. Stewart of Utah. So does that mean that you never had a contract, Mr. Henry, with the DNC directly then? Mr. Henry, I mentioned it with Michael Sussman from Perkins Coie. Right? So that's how that's working, right? So this is the new stuff, right? So this is from CNN. Special Counsel John Durham concludes FBI never should have launched full Russia. And here's the Daily Beast. John Durham owns the American people. An apology for wasting their money. Look, they literally call it a nothing burger. That's literally a nothing burger for them, right? So Monday, Durham knocked the FBI for failing to take several steps before launching the Trump campaign investigations, such as interviewing several steps before launching the Trump campaign investigations, such as interviewing relevant witnesses, reviewing its own intelligence databases, or using any of the standard analytical tools typically employed by the FBI in evaluating raw intelligence. So they just didn't do anything, right? Durham suggested that the FBI had taken those steps and would have found that U.S. intelligence agencies did not have any evidence trying Trump to Russian leadership officials. The report cites for comparison examples of how the FBI approached investigations concerning former Secretary of State and 2016 Democratic White House nominee Clinton. So this is the big part I wanted people, because this is the new stuff, right? So Durham points specifically to highly significant intelligence the FBI received from a trusted foreign source, pointing to a Clinton campaign plan to vilify Trump by tying him to Vladimir Putin so as to divert attention from her own concerns relating to her use of a private email server. So that's the big takeaway. Unlike the FBI's opening of a full investigation of unknown members of the Trump campaign based on raw, uncorroborated information in the separate matter involving a purported Clinton campaign plan, the FBI never opened any type of inquiry, issued any taskings, employed any analytical personnel, or produced any analytical products in connection with that information, the report said. Durham notes that the FBI did not open an investigation into a purported plan by foreign operatives to target the Clinton campaign, but rather took other steps in responses to those concerns, which included providing defensive briefings for the then Democratic presidential nominee and her staff. Right? So they were kicking back this information to her staff. Right? So, Greg Pice, breaking, according to the Durham report, the plan by Hillary Clinton to create a false story linking Donald Trump to Russia was briefed in August of 2016 by CIA Director John Brennan to President Obama, VP Biden, AG Loretta Lynch, and FBI Director Comey. you remember a certain AG meeting with a Mr. Clinton on a plane for a couple of hours on the tarmac? Okay. So here's some of this. The office was also considered as part of his investigation the government's handling of certain intelligence that it received during the summer of 2016, right? That intelligence concerned the purported approval by Hillary Clinton on July 26, 2016, of a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by the Russian security services. We refer to that intelligence hereafter as the Clinton Plan Intelligence. They literally had to name this, right? So DNI John Ratcliffe declassified the following information about the Clinton Plan Intelligence in September 2020 and conveyed it to the Senate Judiciary Committee, right? In late 2016, U.S. intelligence agencies obtained insight, late July 2016, intelligence agencies obtained insight into Russian intelligence analysis alleging that U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton had approved a campaign plan to stir up a scandal against U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump by trying him to Putin and the Russians' hacking of the DNC emails. The ISC does not know the accuracy of this allegation or the extent to which the Russian intelligence analysis may reflect exaggeration or fabrication. According to his handwritten notes, CIA Director Brennan subsequently briefed President Obama and other senior national security officials on the intelligence, including the alleged approval by Clinton on July 2016 of a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by Russian security services. So this is all the documentation that they're doing here, right? So, relevant facts. Before addressing the U.S. government receipt and handling of the Clinton Plan Intelligence, we reiterate below the description of the intelligence that is classified by the DNI in a September 29th letter to Chairman Ghraib. Ratcliffe's letter stated in part as follows. In late July 2016, U.S. intelligence agencies obtained insight into Russian intelligence analysis alleging that U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton had approved a campaign plan to stir up a scandal against U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump by tying him into Putin and the Russians hacking the Democratic National Committee. As described herein and in the classified appendix, U.S. officials described the Clinton Plan Intelligence in various other ways in their official notes and documents as described more fully in the classified appendix. There were specific indications and additional facts that heightened the potential relevance of this intelligence to the office's inquiry. So they were trying to say, like, hey, look at this. It's important. Right? On August 3rd, 2016, within days of receiving the Clinton Pan Intelligence, Director Brennan met with President, Vice President, and other senior and admin officials, including but not limited to the AG, who participated remotely, and the FBI Director in the White House Sitch Room to discuss Russian election interference efforts. According to Britain's handwritten notes and his recollections from the meeting, he briefed on relevant intelligence known to date on Russian election interference, including the Clinton Plan Intelligence. Specifically, Director Brennan's declassified handwritten notes reflect that he briefed the meeting's participants regarding the alleged approval by Clinton on 26th of July of a proposal from one of her advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by the Russian security services. Right? So we also have was unable to determine precisely when the FBI first obtained any of the details of the Clinton Pan Intelligence, other than Director Comey, who attended that August 3rd briefing. It appears, however, that this occurred no later than August 22nd, 2016. On that date, an FBI cyber analyst emailed a number of FBI employees, including Supervisor Intelligence Analyst Brian Otten and Section Chief Maffa, the most senior intelligence and analysts on the Crossfire Hurricane team, to provide an update on Russian ... So, McCabe defending the FBI's handling of the investigation in an interview with CNN, Anderson Cooper, Monday night, saying that he vehemently disagreed with the report's findings and calling Durham's probes a political errand on behalf of Trump. Look, the fact is, we know that the Russians were doing and had done in an effort to help Donald Trump, he said on Anderson Cooper. And if you had any information, any intelligence or information that indicated that the Clinton campaign was colluding with the Russians, we would have investigated that as well, except you did and you didn't. McCabe added, but that information doesn't exist and to my knowledge was not happening. So that's where we are now, essentially. Right?
Okay.
I figured I'll add this list of the 61 hacks who peddled Russian collusion and should never be trusted again. You know, here's all of them. Look, we got Malcolm Nance in there, Joy Reid, Chris Hayes, Scarborough. You know, all your favorites. Bill Crystal. Yeah. Max Boot. Thomas Frank. Jake Tapper, right? Anything to add, Collin?
So really, this kind of that was a lot, but it seems to me like they were trying to promote a lot of this anti-Russia sentiment from then.
Yeah,
I think it was just a matter of Trump kind of came onto the scene, and I think basically they kind of used him as.
Well, they also played the same with Bernie, right? You know, Bernie had to go along with this as well. So
right, yeah.
You know.
But I think Trump was in a way a convenient accident in terms of pushing all that sentiment against a guy who was just intolerable by half the population. But it still doesn't excuse the fact that I think they were even without Trump, they were going to push this anti-Russia sentiment anyway. I would imagine if Clinton was president, Hillary, we would have been at war with Russia
earlier.
Back in.
Well, she wanted a no-fly zone over Crimea. So, you know, yeah, very much so. But
yeah,
this is an ongoing story. I'll definitely keep an eye on it. I know Aaron was on Jimmy today talking about it. So definitely go check that out for up-to-date stuff there. But, yeah. You ready for the next story?
Yeah. So, something a little new, kind of near and dear to my heart somewhat. This is the region of Africa that I lived in briefly, over 10 years ago. But I thought it was interesting, so I decided to pull it up. So last week there was a petroleum conference which was held in Kampala, Uganda last week. So the idea of this conference is East Africa, at least as particularly in Uganda, is very rich in petroleum deposits. So obviously, if you have petroleum, you know, you want to utilize it. So, and as we said in the article that I will read in a few minutes, that there are a lot of groups who are pushing for leaders not to export petroleum, but rather to invest in more sustainable energy means of production. So, so as I said, this was happening of last week. So just to give you an idea of a little bit in terms of this conference and just kind of the issues around that, I'm going to play this clip. Although it's kind of an interesting spin, which we will talk about briefly. But just to give you guys a little bit more of an understanding of, you know, just an overview of this conference and the issues around that. So if you can go ahead.
Underdeveloped and developing countries' ambition is to industrialize by utilizing their natural resources. Uganda is one of those countries that have abundant oil and gas deposits, but face criticism for harnessing it.
Less than 0.2% in East Africa. How would you tell this region to decarbonize? It's like telling the fat kid in class to lose, the skinny kid in class to lose weight while the fat kids keep eating. That is not something we need to do. Not this time, not now. We do not need just nothing to decarbonize. We need to produce those resources to serve the people in this region.
The three-day conference on the theme Sustainable Management of East Africa's Oil and Gas Resources, Balancing the Environment, Social and Governance Aspect, has brought together sector players from the region and beyond under one roof to discuss and lay strategies geared at harnessing oil and gas resources.
The oil and gas sector does not operate in isolation. The development of the other enabling infrastructure is crucial for attracting more investment in this sector. An example is an extensive road network improvement and expansion plan, which is in place under the East African Transport Strategy and Road Sector Development Program.
Although Uganda has made major strides towards achieving its 2025 oil and gas production target, there are project funding gaps that must be urgently addressed.
And I've been telling everybody that Africa is not poor. We just lack some finances. But we are not poor. Uganda is not poor. And Uganda is open to friends. So the financing institutions must hear this as banks plan to pull out because of the narrative of fossil fuel. We are watching as Africa. We are opening doors.
Recently, Standard Chartered Bank, one of the lead financiers, with an offer of $5 billion for the 1,443 kilometers East African crude oil pipeline, pulled out of the project due to protracted efforts by activists to discredit the project over its anticipated carbon emissions and consequences to the environment. The 10th biannual East African Community Oil and Gas Conference and Exhibition comes at a time when the talk of the town is energy transition, and this means Uganda and the rest of the region is racing against time in its quest to have its first oil in the international market. Dennis Igoa for UBC News in Kampala.
I love how I'm not sure if you caught this at the beginning, that the West was like, no, don't drill that.
Yeah.
You can't drill it, but we will come and take it.
We can. Right. Yep.
So, so anyway, just to give you guys some context. So actually, there is a pipeline that's being in the process of being built in the East Africa region. I probably should do a follow-up on that. I actually did not really know about this until I started researching this. So it might be well worth time to kind of make a deep dive into it at some point. So maybe over the summer I can go into that a little bit more when I have more time. But for now, so this is an article written in Common Dreams.
Other way. There you go.
Here. Written by Kenny Standstill. And he writes, East African groups urge policymakers to ditch fossil fuels for renewables. The further development of oil, gas, and coal should have no space in African countries, said a new letter. We need to shift to clean energy projects that are people-centered and would benefit local communities first and foremost. So Kenny writes, more than 36 progressive advocacy groups implore East African leaders this week to stop funding fossil fuel projects and instead wrap up investment in renewable energy production and other green economic initiatives. The promotion and or further development of oil, gas, and coal, can you zoom out, please?
Yeah.
Should have no space in African countries, says a new open letter of 41 East African civil society organizations to the region's head of state. We need to shift to clean energy projects that are people-centered and would benefit local communities first and foremost. We need to promote approaches that strengthen energy access and land rights for all Africans while ensuring the protection of nature and our common goods. The letter came amid the 10th East African Petroleum Conference and Exhibition. The theme of the 3-day summit, held in Tuesday through Thursday in Kampala, Uganda, was East Africa as a hub for investment in exploration and exploitation of petroleum resources for sustainable energy and social economic development. Instead of seeming doubling down on fossil fuels, we urge East African leaders to prioritize the adoption of safe and sustainable renewable energy. In their letter published last week, local climate justice campaigners wrote that while we appreciate your efforts to promote energy access and social economic development for East Africans, we are worried that your focus on exploiting the region's petroleum resources stands to undermine your goals. Signatories drew attention to the connections between fossil fuel extraction on the one hand and ecological disasters, violent conflicts, and increased impoverishment and unemployment in affected territories on the other. It has been variously demonstrated that oil and gas exploitation is more harmful than useful to local communities, the letter states. Oil exploitation harms nations' ecological balance through causing forest loss, biodiversity destruction, as well as air, water, and soil pollution. This destruction hurts livelihoods, increases poverty, worsens climate disasters, and increases public as well as housing expenditure on health, disaster management, and others. This does not translate into social economic development, especially for the oil and gas host communities, wrote the signatories. They also expressed concerns about the conflicts that arise due to natural resources exploitation by multinationals in Africa. Furthermore, the exploitation of oil and gas has economic impacts as it causes land loss with insufficient compensation being given to local communities and indigenous peoples, the letter continues. It also accelerates land grabs and negatively impacts economic sectors such as farming, fishing, tourism, and others through the pollution of soils and waters, stuffing fisher folks' access to fishing areas, degradation of national parks, and others. In addition, international oil companies take advantage of the naivety of local communities and rarely respect their commitments to ensure prosperity. While oil companies often make big promises about creating jobs for locals, available evidence indicates that the oil, gas, and mining sectors only employ about 1% of Africa's labor force, notes the letter. Meanwhile, the continued investment in oil and gas stands to result in job losses in the agriculture, fishing, clean energy, tourism, and other sectors. Oil and gas exploitation and the climate change in its fueling is a threat to 60 to 70% of Africa's workforce, the signatories wrote, alluding to the vast majority of people who are employed in agriculture. We request that you protect these workers by investing in renewable energy instead of oil and gas. Africa has significant renewable energy potential, which, if developed, can position the continent to lead the global clean energy transition. Continuing to prioritize investment in oil, gas over wind, solar, and other green sectors threatens to leave East Africa riddled with environmentally hazardous stranded assets, the groups warned, citing the International Energy Agency projections of declining demand for fossil fuels in the coming years. No African country has addressed energy poverty by investing in oil, coal, and gas, Diller points out. Nigeria, which is one of Africa's largest oil producers, has the highest amount of people in the world without access to power. Signatories argued that more of the same can be expected if the Democratic Republic of Congo continues to sell huge tracts of land in the Congo Basin rainforest to fossil fuel giants, or if the East Africa crude oil pipeline is built. Shipping the region's petroleum resources abroad, the letter observes, enriches corporations such as France Total Energies while failing to meet the energy needs of local residents. The letter also stresses that Africa's immense renewable energy potential, including abundant solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal resources, remains largely untapped, with just 9% of the continent's power generated from those sources in 2020. One reason for this is that investments in renewable energy in Africa are limited. According to the letter, only 2% of the clean power investments made globally over the past 2 decades have focused on Africa. This needs to change, the signatories emphasized. To enhance sustainable energy access and promote social economic progress, the groups made the following recommendations. abandon any investments in oil and gas projects such as the EACOP and the auction of oil blocks in the Congo. This is very important as East Africans also need to avoid the risk of stranding assets, a threat that is imminent due to the just energy transition plans of some of the countries that are the biggest markets for oil and gas. Redirect private and public investments into renewable energy through working with your governments to put in place enabling policies, increasing budget allocations to renewable energy, and lobbying investors to invest in renewable energy. Promote green economic alternatives that employ the majority of East Africans, such as agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. It's concerning that regional leaders should meet to discuss how to build new oil projects when the world is transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy, Dickens Kamugisha, CEO of Uganda-based African Institute for Energy Governance, said Friday in a statement. In its 2021 World Energy Outlook report, the International Energy Agency indicated that oil demand is expected to level off in the mid-2030s and decline in 2050. Yet East African countries are borrowing huge amounts of money to invest in oil and gas, said Kamugisha. How will they recoup the monies that are invested? East Africans are poor and should not be straddled with assets that could become stranded. Governments should avoid investing in coal, oil, and gas. Despite bearing little historic responsibility for the climate crisis, East Africans are also particularly vulnerable to extreme weather disasters, as Jimmy Ufoy from the Ituri region of the DRC lamented. The Congolese Red Cross says that at least 411 died in the Democratic Republic of Congo following the flooding this week, said Ufoy. It was therefore disturbing to see the DRC speak of bilateral engagement with Uganda to develop hydrocarbons and access to the EACOP to transport crude oil. Last June, African advocates urged officials to reject the IEA's call for nations across the continent to swiftly extract and export their fossil gases reserves before the world scales up its shift to clean energy resources. Rather than follow the IEA's recommendation, which came just months after the Paris-based agency said that expanding coal, gas, and oil production is incompatible with maintaining a livable planet, African policymakers should focus on implementing sustainable renewable energy solutions as quickly as possible, the activist said. On Friday, Charity McGree, regional campaigner at free50africa.org, reiterated that Africa has significant renewable energy potential, which, if developed, can position the continent to lead a global clean energy transition. Instead of seemingly doubling down on fossil fuels, we urge East African leaders to prioritize the adoption of safe and sustainable renewable energy, said McGee. Any thoughts?
A couple. I'm interested to hear what you think about it, but I think they're wrestling with two things, and you see the world kind of wrestling with this too, right? Where there's this, especially with Africa in regards to hydrocarbons, they feel that we've gotten to use this amazing resource forever, and now the minute that they're developing to where they could use it effectively, now we're telling them they shouldn't, right? So now that's part of it.
Now they're telling them shouldn't, but I feel it's just under the false pretense of being like, you can't use it for the benefit of your own people, but we can take it for the benefit of people abroad.
Yeah.
See, and this is kind of where I go into in terms of, this is why I'm very careful in terms of like people saying that China has this altruistic view in terms of developing, these countries in particular, because they know like the resources that are there, and China having access. Well, the reality is China would need to use some of their resources in order to build the infrastructure that's there.
Right.
But they get to benefit financially with whatever infrastructure is being created in these countries. So it's not necessarily, and it makes sense, but I would argue if it's really, to the benefit of Africans, even though they do get nice things.
Yeah.
But, you know, as the article says, you know, like the short term, you know, result of the infrastructure doesn't necessarily equate to the long-term disasters that are on the pipeline, especially since Africa may not be able to kind of switch
Well,
from
that's the
fossil
thing
fuels
is
to
that
renewable energy
yeah,
within the next 3 decades.
they're trying to make the claim that the fossil fuels aren't going to give you a return on your investment. Like you
Right.
may find that your stores aren't what you need them to be, right? And B, you may get a better bang for your buck switching to putting that same effort and into renewable infrastructure. So I'd love to see them do that
But
effectively.
the issue is, and you know, I'm very interested to see if we can get Kenny on to maybe talk about this a little more, or somebody else who has a little bit more information than this than me. But my guess is, this is just a theory, but I don't think I'm too far off the mark on this. You know, the resources aren't necessarily there to develop the renewable energy outlook that they need to have, because the education and the tact in order to implement that
Yeah, I mean
isn't
the thing is that they're borrowing money. They're borrowing money either way.
right. Well,
Like,
I'm not even talking about borrowing money. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the idea of, like, you know, Africans being able to get the education and the know-how in order to help develop that technology. Like, my guess is it's not there, or very sparse, that depending where you live, I would imagine for many people who are looking to get into that will have to go abroad in order to get that know-how. And
Yeah.
that in itself is very expensive. It's very difficult to, you know, I know for Uganda, it's very difficult to get a visa in order to leave the country for a prolonged period. You basically have to prove why, you know, like you have to leave, which can take years.
Yeah.
And then you have to have basically a sponsor in wherever you're going to kind of vouch for you in order to be there. But you have to show that you're willing to return. So, you know, so I kind of fault governments on this in a way of, you know, I think this is kind of the government's excuse, as Kenny was saying in the article, like, look, we have this resource, we need to develop it, we need it now. It's a way to kind of support our countries, especially given the East African Federation is growing. It's a way to kind of keep trade within that federation, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But
where's that
you
money
know,
ultimately going? You know, so
right.
like that's the
And
thing.
then especially, you know, like what Kenny stated is that they're looking to trade, you know, so where they're going to trade to, more likely
here's
Europe.
what I think they should do. They should get together and make it a music park. They're going to partner with Disney. They're going to just call it Wakanda, you know, and make loads of money, you know. So
Right.
I say they just do that on tourists, and then we'll be all right.
Right. But
You know?
along with the money, the question is, where's that money going to? Because it's not necessarily going to the laborers there. You know, if anything, it will work to their detriment. Like, the money that will be spent will go to trade, as I said, to Europe or even America, you know, like, depending how things go within the next few years, given our issues with Ukraine, and probably Taiwan, well enough. But, you know, that the investment is not necessarily, and I could see, and I can imagine being on the ground, that the investment in the people is not necessarily going to come in a way that the illusion of it will, according to people who are saying otherwise. Like, oh, this will benefit our countries, therefore it will benefit you. I'm pretty sure people in the bush will not see that benefit.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I really feel like this is a call to actually, I think the true investment should be in the education and to develop, you know, people from this region who are willing to get that education. And I would argue that needs to be there. So kind of going back to, our Howard students, who are going out into the world, like these are the kind of investments that I think, especially in the West, especially if you're Black in living in the West, these are the kind of investments that we should be making, because relative, and this is the argument that I say all the time, is that, yeah, I mean, our situation over here is shit, but relatively compared to our African cousins, is a lot better in terms of the access that we have to the education and the resources here. We're able to, like, in my mind, it would make more sense to be like, look, East Africa is opening its doors to us. I know in Rwanda, they're trying to do that to some degree, not to the degree that I would like them to, but it's the idea of like, instead of having, Westerners who are non-Black going over and having an ulterior motive in terms of what, how they're able to utilize the resources for the benefit of their countries. I can also argue with China as well. It should be a situation where Black Westerners say, hey, we have the know-how. We're looking for a way to kind of invest in the country, but also kind of given, East Africa, not necessarily directly tied to our history, but similar, so it's like, you offer us the resources and the know-how and the education. We offer you, fill in the blank, investment in the country, like we're able to help develop it, in the means of trying to reconnect to the continent. That would be the ideal that I would think that, that African leaders will try and promote. But it just seems like to me that a lot of talk in regards to, we help develop the country, it's a way of building their trade with Europe, China, America, which unfortunately with, a dying industry, essentially. So it's kind of like, I kind of make the joke that Africa is like a decade late in terms of tech.
Right.
And this is kind of an example of that. Is like, yeah, it's good that you're thinking in terms of trying to develop the countries in terms of, making you stand out on the world stage, but everyone has kind of moved on from that.
Yeah.
So,
well,
it sucks that they
speaking
have
of
to
a
kind
decade ago,
yeah, this is interesting because when you told me about this, I thought this was a recent
like
thing.
recent thing. I thought so too. Like, because like I hadn't heard about it, and I kind of follow these things. You think somebody would have picked up on it, right? So, bad apples, Collin. Do you remember people being called bad apples in regards to this? I kind of do.
Kind of.
Yeah. So, Bad Apples, the Abu Ghraib musical, is a tale of soldiers behaving badly by Misha Berson, special to the Seattle Times, right? So, shock, revulsion, shame, common reactions in 2004 to the newly revealed photographs of U.S. soldiers gleefully tormenting inmates at Baghdad's Abu Ghraib prison during the Iraq War, arranging captured stripped men in lewd poses, posing with dead, tortured, and humiliated prisoners. The khaki-clad shutterbugs were just bad apples, insisted then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. But were they simply rogue soldiers or underlings who took the fall for intentionally condemned policies adopted by our own government? Which one do you think, Care Bear? I mean,
the former.
Yeah, like, so Rumsfeld unwittingly supplied the title for a pop musical, yes, musical, about the Abu Ghraib debacle, which debuted at LA Circle X Theater in 2012. Now the revised Bad Apples has opened in Seattle, co-produced by Act Lab and Act Theater, where it's playing Circle X and Arts West. right? So that's where it played. Scripted by screenwriter-playwright Jim Leonard, with a hard rock alt-folk score by Beth Thornley and Rob Cairns. The show is ambitious in scope, bloated in size, 3 hours, and 2 intermissions, Collin.
Wow.
And conflicted in its ill-conceived mission to entertain and amuse, while evoking a tawdry nightmare that defied international law and human decency. Set in the mock night spot, Club Abu, war is a cabaret, old chum. It is an overstuffed collage of scenes, monologues, satirical skits, whiz-bang musical numbers, and video displays. Enacted by an unflagging ensemble under John Lang's direction, it offers a zigzagging, fictionalized account of several soldiers implicated in the Abu Ghraib abuse, including 3 enmeshed in an orgiastic love triangle. So, fun. The musical mostly ponders how a fresh-faced, naive young GI like Lindsay Skinner, outstanding singer-actor Kate Morgan Chadwick, could morph into a lusty torturer. Based on real-life PFC Lindy R. England, Lindsay is a trailer park hick straight out of Central Casting. With few prospects, she feels a surge of post-9/11 patriotism and enlists in the National Guard. She falls for a smooth fellow soldier, Chuck. After they develop to Iraq and posted as prison guards, Chuck, a manipulative seducer-abuser with a violent past, turns Abu Ghraib into his twisted after-hours house of pain. Meanwhile, another lover joins the affair, conscience-free Lieutenant Scott. Leonard has imagined real figures and invented new ones. Curiously, Bird's Chuck, an African-American in the play, is based on a white man, Private Grainer, which inadvertently raises the racial stereotype of a black, quote, stud preying on white women. The fictional role of a repressed Bible Belt innocent in the ranks adds more caricature. Inserting hyped-up rock anthems and ruminative ballads into the jumbled storyline, Bad Apples aims to understand, rather than demonize Lindsay and company, and consider the psychological, environmental, and political triggers for their actions. The Lucifer effect, the theory that bad environments prompt evil doing more than bad apples do, the miserable conditions and oppressive heat in Baghdad, and egregious lack of military training and supervision, poverty and racism, in the fog of a hasty and popular war during a chaotic campaign to flush out terrorists. Chadwick fortifies the production with her fearless turn as a cocky yet emotionally vulnerable fool for love. But how can we excuse Lindsay's ghastly behavior? And like England, her refusal to show remorse. Though based in fact, the sexual melodrama grows tiresome. More provocatively, Bad Apples also wanders up the chain of command to spread blame to military brass. Iraq War architects Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, George W. Bush. A 2014 bipartisan Senate report concurred that under their watch, torture was not only condoned, but encouraged. We have to thank Kiriakou for some of that. We see little simulated torture in Bad Apples, but are not spared graphic Abu Ghraib photos, displayed in Jason H. Thomas's projection design on Julia Hayes Welch's multi-level set. They're hideous enough. But satirical bits like a sing-along with Cheney as a bouncing ball over the lyrics feel trivial. Its more informative segments, innocent torture victims bitterly testifying, private contractors acting coy about their jobs as hired hand interrogators, that hit harder. Most songs seem inserted rather than integral. These are polished up tempo numbers with drill team choreography by Crystal Dawn Munkers and an affecting ballad or two, the dark swoony Surrender. Yet often, Bad Apples bogs down in a stylistic hodgepodge and a muddled attempt to inform, titillate, empathize, and expose. So, yeah. Thoughts, Care Bear?
Sounds Shakespearean in scope.
I guess. It's just like, what? It just seems like...
why?
Right. Like, you tried to expose stuff, but also missed like 90% of the stuff to expose by turning it into like a weird love story. It reminds me of like a John Waters situation, right? Where it's just like the trashiness of it is the shtick, right? You know, I hope, but you know, it's definitely some bad taste. I'll admit that. Like, not necessarily a good subject matter for the stage, you know? So,
but I think that's the thing. It's like they wanted to make it be salacious as possible, but I think given the aspect of war, that I think just really heightens it as the pull for people to kind of be like, "Oh, that sounds interesting."
Right.
I just kind of feel like, well, again, this was over a decade ago, so so times have changed, but I don't think it will work in the same way now compared to you know, back then. I think then we were still kind of in the, you know, like kind of still kind of going through
waterboarding, the rock opera, like, you know.
So it's it's just weird, just kind of like some liberal weirdness that I don't get, you know.
Yeah. So, well, that's our show for today, folks. I've got we'll hit this again on our way out, but Comrade Misty's bitch will be coming to INN if you missed it at the beginning. That'll be Saturdays. I don't know if we're sure on time yet. The old ones used to be around 7, so we'll see how that goes for Misty, but you know,
we'll figure it out. Follow us on Twitter. And we'll let you know when the show will premiere and where, because we also need to think about like if it's going to be a YouTube thing or like a very limited YouTube thing or like a Rumble exclusive, a Rock thing, Rumble exclusive. So we have to figure out the details because, as we know, our girl doesn't like being censored, and we're not looking to try and strike.
We'll figure it out though.
We'll figure it out.
We have some options. So, but yeah, stay tuned. Follow at Get Indie News on Twitter to get updates on that kind of stuff. And just go sub to Brockfin and Rumble if you haven't already. You can find those links right there at indienews.network. Just head to that URL. It's in the description below. You can find all the links to all the members and all the channels of INN. Anything else, Collin? How do we miss that Sunday?
How we miss that Sunday?
No Tara Friday.
No Tara Friday. There might be a stream with Crab and Chris
Monday.
Possibly, maybe. I think actually they do want to talk about the crystal idea. So look out for that. And this will probably be I can probably say this now. But we're gonna interview Nico House. So we're trying to secure a day. It'll probably be next week, but more likely that will be a pre-recorded interview. So if we do it, then it probably will premiere later on next week. So, but we'll let you know for sure once we have that.
Otherwise, Monday alternative angle. Check that out. But yeah, stay tuned. You know, appreciate you peeps for being here. So as always, neighbors are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.